Welcome back to Beat Up Builds. My name's Daniel, and I've come to realize I'm a little bit famous. Not because of YouTube, because of a car I built. I'm the first person that I know of that put a small block Ford into a third-gen Celica. So I was the first person to put a small block Ford in a third-gen Celica. I made a build thread on it. It's probably like 50 or 60 pages. And now everybody that swaps Ford in there, like if I see anybody, I always like offer to help and everything. And then they go, "Oh my God, you're the guy that did the build thread." And that's kind of how I'm famous, I guess now. I feel like everyone that's doing that swap knows who I am. It's really cool. To help start that, But I'm going to go into like how I got the car. I'm going to summarize the build thread because the build thread's gotten old now. It's photo bucket. It's hard to see the pictures, a whole bunch of comments and everything in there. I'm going to summarize that so that way you can see what I did. I'm going to put timestamps in here so that way you can jump around to where you want to be if you don't want to watch everything. If you just want to see what I did, jump ahead to that part. But anyway, the Celica, it wasn't my first car. My first car was my Dart. My dad bought it for me. It needed some work and stuff. The Celica is probably like my third car. I crashed a couple of cars, but I was probably like 18 or 17 when I got that. I said, "Hey, Dad," he wanted to buy me a car. I'm like, "Dad, it has to be a rear-wheel drive and a stick shift." Because I wouldn't have fun with it. And this is what he turned up with. He turned up with a third-gen Toyota Celica 22RE. Kind of a good compromise, I guess, for someone that young because it was very slow. But it was still a lot of fun. I did, the basic mods. I cut off the exhaust, put a glass pack on. I did some hop-ups to the 22RE. And, it does a little bit every time you do something to the 22RE, but it doesn't, they just don't make power. You have to either boost it or like you got to boost it, like supercharger turbo. I guess maybe you could do nitrous too, but that probably wouldn't be cost effective on the street. So anyway, it was slow, but it was good. I was young, and it was a lot of fun until I got into an accident. I was probably like 18 at the time. I was coming home from work, and I'm going straight. The guy in front of me pulls off into the left lane, and then as I'm getting right next to him, he decides he wants to go right. So I basically T-boned him at like 35 miles an hour. I was able to drive the car home, so it wasn't too bad, but it wrecked like the whole front end and stuff. My dad was awesome. He worked with the insurance and got as much as he could out of them. And then he took it back to the auto body place he was working, and he did a full like custom paint job on this thing. He knocked it out of the park. It's the coolest paint job I've ever seen on one of these things. If I got another one, I would be dying to put the same paint job back on. It was just the coolest thing ever. I don't know if it's just because my dad did it or what. I thought it was awesome. It was really cool. So once it was all fixed up, like I was 18 with this really cool looking car, I don't know, I felt like I was on top of the world, but it was still slow, and it had a peg leg rear end, and it was fun, but I knew there was more levels to go here. So the next thing I did, I got a super rear end, solid axle one. They're really hard to find now. I wouldn't recommend searching one out anymore. If you find one for cheap, good for you, but they're hard to find. But that got me rear disc brakes, but more importantly, it got me a bigger rear end that I could get a posi for, or limited slip, or whatever you want to call it. So then I had 2 tires spinning, and I could get it sideways, and it was a lot more fun then. That made it really cool. And then around that time, my buddy got a 91 22 RE, two-wheel drive pickup, manual steering. He got a killer deal on that. Kind of did the same mods, and then he's got a turbo for it, and we tuned it on the stock injection. It made like 8 pounds of boost, and it woke up the engine a good bit, but it was still slow. It was just better, and he had his fun with that. I think at the same time I was like, oh, the turbo is cool. Like, I got a turbo on mine. So I got a Mega Squirt, and I assembled the whole Mega Squirt, like, myself in my bedroom with a soldering iron and everything. It was super fun and cool. Got that all tuned up, and I was getting ready to work up to doing a turbo. I was going to get all the stuff. And then I don't remember why. Like, my buddy had blown up a bunch of engines in his 22RE turbo. And I don't know what happened, but we decided to put a V8 into his truck. My dad had a 305 sitting in the corner. He's like, oh, it's a great engine. It's low miles, but it's a 305. Like, nobody wants a 305. It's, they're junk. They don't make power. So we put that into his truck. We got a T5 transmission. And we put this thing in the truck in like a weekend. It was literally like a weekend, I swear to God. We got that thing in there, and that truck was so much fun with that motor. My buddy blew it up like the first day, but after that, I was like, forget turbocharging this car. It needs a V8. It's going to be so cool with a V8. So that's how I ended up putting the V8 in there. That's how I came to do that. Next, I'm going to go into what it took to do it. So now on to the best part. How did I do it? So I tried Ford, Chevy, and Mopar small blocks. The Mopar fit the worst. It's the biggest. The Chevy, it was all right, but the oil pan kind of caused issues. I can't remember if that was front or rear. That's eluding me right now, but the oil pan and the pickup was some of the problem, and I think it was hard to get the right pickup and everything. And really, the Ford was also smaller on top of being able to get a good oil pan and pickup for it easily. The Ford was a lot smaller, and it just fit better. I had one laying around I could use, so that's kind of why I went with the Ford. I wasn't like a huge Ford guy. Like, I don't hate Ford or anything, but I'm more of like a Mopar Toyota guy. I don't hate Chevy. I don't hate Ford. Like, I would still run those engines and things. But yeah, I wasn't like a Ford guy and wanted a Ford in it. It just fit the best. That was really honestly the whole reason I put a Ford in it. So my dad had a Ford laying around. It was a 302. It wasn't a roller or anything. I used that for mock-up, and I was originally going to use it if you do go look at my build thread. But I used that for mock-up. The motor mounts, I don't love what I did for the motor mounts, but I'll tell you what I did anyway, so you can figure something out. But basically, I took where the stock motor mounts would mount on the Celica, and I cut, there's kind of like a lip that the motor mount can sit in. I cut those lips off so it was flat, and then I put a big piece of, like a rectangle piece of 1/4-inch plate on top of that, because I think the mounts were back a little bit on the Ford from where the Toyota was. I did that on both sides, and then I took, I believe it was 74 Torino 302 engine mounts, and like it would sit around the chassis, so it had two ears that kind of hung down. I beat those flat, and then I just mounted it flat. Wasn't the most beautiful motor mount ever, but it was a really simple way to just get it done. It worked, but if I did it again, I'd like to do it a little bit different. But that's what I did for that. The sway bar needed to get spaced down. I think I actually cut the mounts off and then spaced it down with a piece of angle iron. I can't remember specifically if I moved the mounts in a little bit to get more room, or if you could have just spaced them down with a piece of a piece of square stock or something like that. But the sway bar does need to come down a little. I think I might have just left the end links the length they were, but I probably should have shortened them. I was still pretty young when I did all this, so I didn't have as much knowledge as I do now. But it'll work if you just space it down a little bit. And I think that people will also swap in, I want to say like a Camaro sway bar. I want to say the rear Camaro sway bar into the front sometimes. I've seen that with other engine swaps and things like that. So that might be an option. As far as the trans mount, I actually used the World Class T5. I just thought it would be easier. In hindsight, I'm not sure what would be better, honestly, the W58 with an adapter or the T5. I really don't know. But I used the T5. It fit really easily in there. I used the stock trans mount, and then I used the stock Toyota cross member for the transmission. I spaced it down 1 inch with some, I actually used 1 inch square stock and then reinforced it, but probably like bar stock would be better, then you wouldn't have to reinforce it. Or you could, whatever, you just gotta space it down 1 inch. And I moved it forward. There's a couple sets of holes for the cross member, so I moved it forward one, and then 2 of the holes line up with the 2 holes on the Ford transmission mount. So all I did was drill the holes just a little bit bigger because they take a bigger bolt. And that was it for the transmission mount. That was really easy. I lucked out. It probably took, an hour or something to figure all that out. It was pretty easy. Just happened to work out that way. If you're doing it for yourself, it might be a good way to set everything. Like if you are using a T5 to do the transmission mount and then figure out your engine mounts, because that'll make the transmission mount real easy. But that's up to you. That's how I did it. Let me see what else I have. So then down to like the speedometer. It's got a different end on it than the Toyota has. I don't know what the Ford originally had, but what I ended up doing is I got a Ford-Chevy adapter because my buddy's truck, when he did the Chevy T5, it's just a square basically that goes in there. So all I did is I took the cable, I got the Ford-Chevy adapter, and I took the cable end and I ground it into a square so it would fit into there. I don't think I needed to shorten it or anything. I just ground it square very carefully, and then it fit right into that Chevy adapter, and I had a speedometer. And then I think maybe I changed the gears in the tranny or whatever to get the speedometer correct, but that's all I did to get a speedometer. Really easy. The fuel pump, what I did at first is I disconnected the electric fuel pump and just left it in, and I had a mechanical fuel pump, and it just pulled past that electric one. That works okay, unless you're on the gas for like more than like 20 seconds, and then the float bowls run out. So that's something you could do to get it going at first, but ultimately what I did is I got a fuel regulator that had a return line on it, and then I also made sure, I don't know if it matters too much, but I made sure that I got one that said it would go down to like 5 psi, and then I was able to just use the stock fuel pump for the 22RE and adjust it down to 5 psi so I'd be happy with the carburetor, and that worked perfectly after I did that. That was really easy to do that. The radiator, I don't remember which one specifically I used. I could go back, if you have any questions on the parts I used, I could probably go back into Google, my Gmail or whatever, and search the parts. If anyone's interested, just leave a comment, and I can try and do that for you. Be glad to help. So the radiator, I got like I think it was a Jegs or a Summit brand, whatever was the biggest I could fit, and then I cut the opening a little bit larger, and I put it kind of under the core support, so I'd have a little more room, and that worked out okay. I had a little bit of issues at first. It was overheating, but I got a better fan, and then that solved that. My advice is just go as big as you can on the radiator within reason. Just make it fit good. Tucking it under the core support, that helped a lot too. That gave me a lot more room than trying to put it in front. I don't know if there'd even be room for a fan if you put it in front, unless you put the fan in front to push through, then maybe. But I think there was not as much room to mount a fan that way. So I think that's how I did all that. The drive shaft, what I did for that is I got it shortened, and then because I had the Toyota rear end, I found an adapter from a 1310 U-joint to that Toyota flange, and just got the shaft I had, I think I just shortened. So that wasn't too bad there, to be honest. If you were doing this in the future with a solid rear axle car, I'd get a Ford 8.8, get another short side axle, and then shorten the other side to fit that other short side axle, so you have two short sides, and it becomes a centered pumpkin. And that'll get you pretty close to like Toyota width and everything. But then you gotta make mounts and everything. But that'd be a good rear. You could get cheap and a good way to do that. That super rear is pretty hard to find nowadays. The Tach, what I did at first is I got an adapter. I think it was like Dakota Digital made an adapter. So that's what I had at first, and then that stopped working. I don't know if it was the Tach adapter itself, or maybe I had some shoddy wiring. I really don't know. I have taken that Tach adapter apart, and I didn't notice anything smoked on it, so it may have just been my wiring. I don't know. But what I ended up doing after that is I did a lot of research, and I realized that on the circuit board on the back of the speedometer, tachometer, and all the instrument cluster and all that, there's two resistors on there, and all you need to do is change those two resistors. And basically, if you go from 4 to 8 cylinders, you've doubled how many times it sparks. So I think I calculated what the ohms were with two resistors in parallel, not series, in parallel. That's very important. Keep that in mind. I had to learn that the hard way. So two resistors in parallel, the ones that were there, and all I did was double what their ohms was and solder it back in. And the tachometer worked pretty good. It was a little tiny bit slow if you revved it in gear because it revved up, or out of gear because it revved up pretty quick, but in gear it worked fine. And it probably cost me like 20 cents to do that. So that's a cool way to do that. I think that was basically it, honestly. I had a low-rise intake manifold 4-barrel, and with I think I made a drop-base carburetor or a drop-base air cleaner that set the air cleaner back a little too, and then it cleared the hood. And there's some smaller air cleaners that cleared the hood too, so that was kind of cool too. But that was pretty much it for the mods. That's the meat and potatoes of how to do it. It's really not that much. I'd be glad to answer any other questions you have, parts or anything. Leave me a comment, and I'll get back to you, and I'll answer you if you have a question. I want to see more of these swaps on the road, to be honest with you, so I'm happy to help people. Alright, maybe this is the best part. I actually have some footage of the car driving around a little bit. So I'm going to cut to that, check that out real quick, and then we'll come back and finish up. So let me get into a couple of the issues I had. Some of them were just because I was inexperienced. Other things were other things. So the one thing was the overheating. I mentioned that earlier. At first, I had like two crappy eBay fans on there, and they did not work at all. They sucked. And then I got like I think it was a Spall fan. Like I paid up for a decent fan. And then after that, it finally cooled decent. I did have it melt there was like a thermal controller thing, and it melted that. I think that was a Durale. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. I don't think that was wired wrong or anything. It just like melted, which was kind of weird. So maybe don't buy them. I don't know. That was an issue I had. Then another issue I fought for a long time was the clutch. So at first I had this like hokey thing rigged up to try and use the factory clutch slave because I like doing that. It's just keep all the factory stuff as much as I can. It worked on my buddy's Chevy with the T5. He was able to take a piece of angle iron, mount the clutch slave on there, and that I think we did that in like 5 minutes, and he went through like a million motors and had that thing for a few years and never changed that. It just worked perfect for him. Now in this car, I tried to do a similar thing, and it didn't work out with the factory slave. Then I tried like a different slave that was a different diameter. That helped a little, and then I think I went to a different diameter master cylinder, and that helped a little. And then ultimately I went to one of those internal slaves that goes inside the bell housing, and that got me. I think that pretty much had it fixed, but the clutch pedal was really hard. I don't know if I needed maybe a little bit bigger bore master cylinder, but that pretty much fixed that. But I had already like messed up the synchros in fifth, so you couldn't like you'd run through fourth, and then I think fourth would get you to like 130 or 120, and you go to bang fifth, and like you couldn't bang fifth, like you just couldn't. You had to like really like very gingerly get it in there. If you were driving normal, it was fine. It was just when you were like going really fast and you were trying to get fifth, you couldn't get fifth. Really, I think I've only gone 130, mostly because of that, I think, and also I didn't have a lot of room to go faster either. So that was a big issue I had. That was probably the biggest one I had during the whole swap. Was fighting with that. Another thing to note is I had the first engine that was in there was a Fox body, like a 90-something Fox body 5.0. Completely stock. I think I got it for $300 or whatever, put a carb intake on there, and I was off and running. I had rigged up V-belts on there using the Toyota accessories at first. It was really hokey, but it worked. But there was like a couple belts, so it stuck out a ways. So there wasn't a lot of room for the fan, which sucked. And then that motor, basically like the bearings just slowly ate themselves. It had plenty of oil pressure the whole time. I don't know if it was some kind of imbalance in the motor in somehow, or if maybe it got dropped on the crank and bent the crank or something. It was really strange. So that motor came out. Then I got a Explorer 5.0 that had the GT40P heads. Put those on there. I put a cam in it. I modified the valve springs so they would accept the cam and all that. And that motor was really wicked, but really what I'm getting to is that had the serpentine set up on the front, and that helped a lot with having more room for the fan. I would highly recommend getting a serpentine belt set up for the front over trying to do something with V-belts. Unless maybe you only have the alternator one or something. It didn't have power steering. But the V-belt was nice. It gave me a lot more room. I can't remember. I think what happened with the dipstick is I think I realized that there was, I think the pan had the dipstick or something weird on the Explorer, or something like that. I can't really remember. But I know I ended up making a hole in the pan and then like soldering or something like that. It was like kind of like soldering. I think I used this thing from Harbor Freight that was like soldering to solder a thing on the oil pan with the dipstick in there. I think that was mostly because I had put everything back together and the engine was in it. I didn't have a dipstick. I think that was just a screw up on my part. But be aware of that. I think what I was doing is I was using the old school like 302 oil pan that came out of the Torino, because the Mustang one wouldn't work, and because it's like a double sump, and the Explorer one, I don't remember how that one looked, but it had like a differential in there and all that, so I think it was really funky looking. Wouldn't suit my application. So I was using like an old school. It was the one out of the Torino, but I bet it fits every 302 back in the 70s. But yeah, there was something with that, so just be aware of that if you put like a newer motor. Just pay attention to your dipstick location. That was just another novice mistake. What else? That's pretty much it. It was pretty. I had a lot of little troubles, but it was mostly, I think, because I was inexperienced. Those were the big problems that I remember having. The car was a lot of fun. I had a real lot of fun with that car. I miss it. I actually had to sell it. Long story short, I moved away and all this stuff, and I just didn't. I wasn't even near the car, and I needed money, so I sold it. It was yeah, that's gonna be the one that I always say like, hey, that one got away, So that's really unfortunate. And then I think a few years after I sold it, somebody commented one of my really old YouTube videos. Like I had a couple videos before I started this channel, and I just kind of like posted something. Like I didn't really try and title it or anything like that. I didn't even try that hard. I just posted, I think, to share in the forums. And somebody found my video, and he was like, "Oh, my buddy bought that car and he parted it out." And that was like, I felt like I got shot in the heart or something, That was horrible. That was horrible to hear that. So yeah, that's going to be the car that got away. I would really like to build another one. I think I would do the Ford again, but I don't know. Part of me wants to try like a Mopar just because it would, I don't know. There's somebody that tried doing a Mopar and they never finished it. So part of me wants to do it just because it hasn't been done. A long time ago, I wanted to do a new Hemi swap. I thought that would have been cool, but I feel like I saw Hot Rod Garage, I think, was trying to hook up a new Hemi, and like it sucked. Like it didn't make a lot of power. Like I don't know if you have to dump a lot of money into them to make power. So I don't know if I want to do that or not. It might be cool just to do the 302 again, but then put like the Cleveland heads on it and try and do something like that. The Cleveland heads are a lot bigger though, so that might cause some issues as far as exhaust and stuff. But that would be pretty cool to do. I mean, then it would like rev up a bunch, like maybe make it use a roller motor, put the Cleveland heads, and make it like scream to the moon or something. That might be a lot of fun. Yeah, it sounds like a good time, honestly. So I don't know if that's something I would do, but I really want to do that down the road here. Let's make that a goal. I want to get another one of those cars, and I want to do the same thing again. I mean, it would be kind of neat to make like motor mounts and make a kit to do this. That'd be cool as well. I don't know. It would just be a lot of fun to do that. I really would like to do that. So we'll see what the future holds. I really hope I can do that. That's a big goal of mine, is to be able to do that. Honestly, I miss that car a lot. So if you guys want to help me do that, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Like I said, leave some comments, and I can help out if you're doing the same swap and you're trying to overcome obstacles, or if there's something you you need help with, I might be able to tell you like exactly how to do it, because I've done it before. So just let me know. I hope more swaps come out of this. I hope this helps people, do this swap and start doing it, because it was a lot of fun to do. The car was like really, really balanced still. It handled really well, but it had a ton of power. It would just do burnouts for days. It was a lot of fun. I would highly recommend doing it. If you're thinking about doing it, just do it. Just go ahead and do it.